Welcome back to the debate. Before the break, we were talking about how the Prime Minister talked about a call for justice and peace, and he said the weak are not voiceless, and how Pakistan has become the voice of the weak, has become a voice for peace, and of course how Pakistan has talked about equitable development and an inclusive environment. To talk more about this, we've also been joined by GR Baluch, former ambassador, as we were earlier joined in the studios by Farrukh Pitafi and Faisal as well, who are still with us in the studios. To begin our conversation, I'd move towards former ambassador GR Baluch. So there was talk of equitable development. At the same time, the Prime Minister mentioned how climate change is affecting the vulnerable countries. Of course, Pakistan, having less than 1% carbon emissions, is still very vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. He also made reference to the devastating floods of 2022. When we talk about equitable development, and of course there's the global phenomena like climate change and how the adverse impacts are affecting different countries with regards to their food security, with regards to the damage to infrastructure and the loss of lives as well. How do you comment on the whole scenario going hand in hand? Dr. Baluch, are you with us? Well, we'll try reconnecting to former Ambassador GR Baluch, but before that I'll come towards Farrukh Pitafi with regards to the same question, as there's talks of equitable development, but at the same time we see global phenomena such as climate change and how they affect developing countries and of course become a huge toll on them. How do you comment on that?
Right. Thank you very much, Rafae, and I am going to answer that because it is very important, particularly equitable development is very close to my heart. And the Secretary General of the UN also has spoken very clearly on that, apart from Prime Minister. In fact, Prime Minister referenced his talk as well. But before that, I wanted to finish the thought that was incomplete before going to the break. And we were talking about war and terror. And very few countries either realize how important or unimportant they are, or perhaps because of the sponsored automatic negative thoughts by the neighbors or enemies, these realizations are lost in them. Pakistan might have actually gone through that kind of state of affairs. Pakistan's story is like that of Atlas or Hercules in Greek mythology, especially when they lifted up the sky, right? Pakistan seems to have actually played a decisive role in changing the course of history at least twice. One in the Cold War, and secondly in the war on terror. The latter was at the cost of its own people, its own economy, its own stability. And I think that it is very important for Pakistan and Pakistan's leadership to keep reminding the world what we have done so far to ensure that civilization continues unabated. Having said that, now the answer to your question, I think that equitable development has become a huge problem because the rich are getting richer. Let me quote actually a reference of Thomas Piketty's Capital in 21st Century. He says that we knew the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, but we did not know the quantum of difference between the two. And it seems that many of them don't realize the difference either. So on one side are nations which get all the opportunities, on the other side you have nations which don't get any opportunity at all. So it is important to be a clear voice of morality, of conscience, and in that of course comes the climate change issue that you highlighted as well. I'm sure that as we move forward in the program, we are going to further discuss that issue, and I hope that we see more climate justice taking place as well.
Definitely. Of course, we'll be talking about that in detail as well. I'd like to include GR Baluch, former ambassador, in the conversation as we have him joined us on Skype. Former ambassador, how do you comment on the Prime Minister's speech as he talked about some very important issues and issues that not just concern Pakistan, but they're for the benefit of the world community at large? As the Prime Minister highlighted the Palestine and Kashmir issue, he talked about the atrocities being committed there. He talked about climate change, rising poverty, debt burden, and of course the Ukraine war and the African nations. He also talked about Islamophobia. How do you comment on all the different aspects the Prime Minister highlighted in his speech?
Yeah, let me just a little bit recap that this UN General Assembly annual meeting is essentially a forum where all the heads of state and heads of government they come and they make statements on political issues, issues of concern to their countries specifically, to the regions, to their respective regions, as well as to the international issues to which they are concerned. And essentially, any speech of a state, of a government, head of government or head of the state, essentially reflects their state policy. So I think from that point of view, Prime Minister Sahib's speech was a comprehensive speech, a very, very kind of focused and with right priorities. If you look at it, I mean, he started with Gaza. Indeed, the entire world is riveted to that story, that tragedy which is unfolding for the last now several months, about to be in a year, and which has now moved on to Lebanon. And he very effectively, I think, highlighted how the people of Pakistan they feel. Because essentially, a statement by a head of state or head of a government is the reflection of the aspiration of the people that he or she is representing. So I think he very effectively represented and expressed the feelings and aspirations and reactions of our people, that what kind of agony this tragedy has brought on us. And I think he called very effectively for a peaceful solution to this tragic war that is going on, and a war of genocide and many other names that we have been discussing for several months now. And of course, he went on to discuss Afghanistan, as you said. That is another very, very important issue of our concern, because it is our neighborhood. We have paid an enormous price for whatever has happened to Afghanistan, not because of us, not because of Afghanistan, but because of those great powers which still control most of the matters in the world. And also that he highlighted the violation of human rights there, especially the women rights, which again is in accord with what the international community is now asking for Afghanistan to do. But most of all, I think the terrorism, the scourge of terrorism, which is actually not only has affected the entire world, but now specifically for Pakistan, Afghanistan, which now unfortunately there are several non-state actors which still are using the Afghan territory as their basis for where attacks are launched almost every week on Pakistan. Although our valiant army and security forces are fighting, but still I think that is taking a lot of human and material and resources toll on us. So I think that need to be was supposed to be highlighted, and he very, very effectively highlighted that. And of course, the Kashmir issue, which is a long-standing pending issue on which Pakistan has a principled stand, and that we still stand with the Kashmiri people for their right of self-determination. And of course, he highlighted the violation of human rights by the Indian occupation forces in Kashmir. Please, yeah.
Now, it is fortuitous that you mentioned Palestine and what is going on in Gaza, because there was another seminal moment when Benjamin Netanyahu actually came to the podium and Prime Minister and Pakistan's delegation walked out. Do you think that that kind of registering of angst and protest, does it also have an impact on the global stage?
Yeah, definitely. These are all diplomatic postures and gestures, and it's a very recognized uh, kind of a reaction to such occasions where we see an undesirable uh, statements to be made, or somebody who represents such a point of view. And also in case of Netanyahu, obviously he represents a country which we do not recognize, and also that Netanyahu, he is a convicted person. He and as we know now that there were a lot of protests outside the UN resolution that he should be arrested because there are arrest warrants against him. through the International Criminal Court. So I think walking out of our the delegation, as well as several other, in fact, what the other channels were reporting that almost the hall was empty. So he spoke to the empty chairs, and this is what he deserves. But I don't know whether he deserves to speak to the General Assembly. There's a question mark itself. But nonetheless, I think it was a correct thing to do for our delegation, and they did it. Yes.
So the Prime Minister, he also talked about and reiterated a call for justice and peace, and his exact words were, "The weak are not voiceless." We were talking about this earlier as well, and he also raised the issue of Islamophobia. Of course, we saw that as this session was underway, Israel ignoring international calls, ignoring all the international norms and the resolutions, it carried on with its genocide, and of course it expanded its genocide to Lebanon as well. How do you comment on the Prime Minister's exact words, "The weak are not voiceless," as it shows Pakistan being the voice of the weak, Pakistan being a voice for peace?
Yeah, indeed. I think that's principal stand that we take. We have been always speaking about people under suppression of other more powerful countries. We always speak about the violation of the basic freedoms. We have spoken against new colonialism that we see in vogue in many countries and through many several manifestations and faces. So I think his saying this, I think, matters a lot, that Pakistan does stand with the truth, Pakistan does stand with the history, and history and truth are constants in the human civilization. That is why we are where we are, despite all the problems that the humanity faces today. But definitely Pakistan is a country which believes in subtle and high human values, has to stand with the weaker who are unfortunately still being suppressed. But obviously those forces of suppression, they not only want to inflict cruelty on them, but they want them to also keep quiet and silence. And this is what he meant, that we would speak, and when the time will come, perhaps the weaker would move and would resist. And this is one form of resistance, is that you speak out against the cruelty. You stand against and speak out against the suppression of the human rights and basic rights of the people. Yeah.
Faisal, in the conversation, of course, we've talked about equitable development and we've talked about Islamophobia. We've also talked about how there's two countries in the world specifically that are resorting to their atrocities, that are resorting to genocide, of course, oppressing the vulnerable communities, and of course, how they ignore the international calls to halt their actions. How do you comment on that? And of course, the issues being highlighted at the United Nations General Assembly, the biggest international fora available.
Yeah, Rafae, when we talk about two countries, of course, Israel and India, they go hand in glove when it comes to, opposing Muslims and Islamophobia itself. If we look at whatever Israel has done since last October, we have been seeing that it is widely being, being considered as a genocide. And of course, ICC came up with the, jurisdiction as well against Israel, and Netanyahu is being termed as a war criminal. And of course, we know that his warrants, they are under process as well, and in coming future we might see that the warrants would be issued for him. But when it comes to India, I mean, look at today's India, especially Kashmir, and then later on I'll talk about the Muslims of India as well. India has been under the rule of Hindu extremism, Hindutva ideology, which has been of course pointing out fingers towards the Muslims, and Muslims at large in India, they are facing the hatred from these Hindu extremism. But when we go to Kashmir, I think the point when Prime Minister highlighted and actually highlighted in this context that the where he's standing right now, this is the very General Assembly that actually passed a resolution back in 1947 in which the resolve of Kashmir was suggested as a plebiscite, and that resolve is being simply ignored by India, that happens to be a member state of United Nations, and is actually trying to sort of edging or trying to sort of lobby within the powerful countries of the world to become one of the members of the Security Council. I mean, Anokha Ladla Khilan ko mange chand, and the very India is actually not accepting the resolutions, and not accepting the resolution at the same time is having its own designs in Kashmir. When we talk about Israel, Israel has a design for Palestine in which they believe in creating so-called Jewish settlements. In the name of Jewish settlements, they of course have captured the Palestinians' lands, they have occupied it, and they squeeze them further down, and now we are seeing that they are trying to of course vacate Gaza. They want all of the Gazans to leave Gaza and go elsewhere so that they can simply occupy that place in the name of trying to search for or trying to find out where Hamas is. And same is the case with Kashmir as well. India, what they have sort of in recent past done is Article 370 and 35A abrogation at that. Then after that we have been seeing that they applied demarcations, and then they went for creating sort of colonies for non-Muslims Indians. Throughout India, they have been of course publicizing that whoever wants to move to Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, they are creating sort of lucrative colonies for them, and more and more businessmen in the field of in the field of real estate, they are being attracted to of course be part of that dangerous plan. And what they are trying to do is they are trying to disturb the demographics of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, so that with the time passes they have more and more people from across India, only the ones who have hatred towards the Muslims, they can be of course inhibited in these areas, so that when the time comes for, in case India has to go for a plebiscite, they can simply say, oh, we have of course equalized kind of a population or from the both sides, Muslims and non-Muslims, so that's why it is not an issue of Kashmiris belonging to Muslims. And furthermore, they have been of course increasing the forces to impose these illegitimate designs in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. When we talk about troops are more than 1 million troops in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. That actually makes it one of the most militarized zone in the world. And for what? Of course, very recently we saw that India held a sort of election which they called election, and in that election of course there were more than 1 million guns who were making people to forcefully come out and vote for what BJP wants or what the Indian military wants them to vote for. And when it comes to people at large, they do not come out for vote, but in the evening when we see the news comes up that 58% of the population has voted for Kashmir. Why do they do it? Because they want to show to the world that if 58% of the population of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is coming out to vote, it is an evidence that they simply believe in the system which is being under the governance from New Delhi, straight away from New Delhi. So it means that they want to stay with India because it's more than 50%, so it should be accepted as their own free will. It is not free will. If it was a free will, then the foreign journalists would have been invited as well to cover, but none of the foreign journalists, they were invited there. None of the observers, neutral observers or international observers, they were invited in there, because they know that these designs, whatever they're showing through their own lens, through their own lens of their cameras, they just want to show that it has been very peaceful, the process was very peaceful. It means that people were not forced to come out, rather they believe in the India as a country, and they believe to be part of India, which is not the case. So these designs are being of course applied. When it comes to overall India at large, it was so good to see the Prime Minister highlighted that the more than 200 million Muslims of India, they are at threat at the hands of extremist ideology called Hindutva ideology. RSS is that champion when it comes to hate mongering against the Muslims, and we shouldn't be forgetting that the current ruling party or elite, I must say, it is BJP, which has always been considered as a political offshoot of RSS. So to me it was important to highlight that, and in a way, as we talk about the Prime Minister being a voice for the voiceless, he has been voice for the voiceless Indians as well, because it is apparent that of course Indian Muslims, they will never allowed in the United Nations to speak against India, but here it is, our Prime Minister, he has spoken in a tone which actually meant that Pakistan is watching everything, and Pakistan of course is recognizing the kind of brutalities are being committed against the Muslims of India at the hands of majority Hindus and majority Hindu extremists, and that needs to be looked into, and that needs to be highlighted, and I think it was the right forum to highlight these things.
In regards to that, for Pitafi, of course, we see that Pakistan has raised these issues. Pakistan has talked about how there needs to be calls for justice and peace in the world. There are other countries, and a majority of the countries of the 193 members of the United Nations, that talked about ensuring peace in the world. But at the same time, we see there's two countries and their allies that promote their radical ideologies, such as the Hindutva ideology. How would you comment on there being calls for peace in the entire world, and then there's the promotion of these radical ideologies?
Right, Rafae, thank you very much for the question. Of course, there is an honorable guest on board, so I will be as brief as possible. I just wanted to actually highlight regarding what we were discussing earlier, and this actually is an answer to your question as well. The Pakistani delegations actually walk out, right? I wanted to comment on that as well, because respect is never given. It is always earned, right? And I think that this Prime Minister, since he took over the last time, he has been actually building his respect in my eyes and in the eyes of many people by actually paying attention to the sentiments of Pakistani people. Remember that because this war in Gaza has been going on for more than a year, almost a year now, almost a year. It is not here right now, but it will be very soon. The world has seen the kind of obnoxious use of power that has been there. And because Israel is an important country, it carries a lot of diplomatic weight. Because of that, many countries haven't been able to speak publicly. But when you talk to their people privately, even people in power, they also condemn it, whatever is going on, the way this butchery has unfolded. So I think that people like me, people of Pakistan, and all people who or against this kind of brutality, they feel seen when Pakistan's delegation actually walks out and registers its protest. Now, talking about these two countries, India and Israel, of course, you were talking about these two, right? One thing you have to remember, that every crisis, every tragedy also brings some opportunity. And in the fact that Netanyahu has been in power for somewhere around 15 years, and Narendra Modi has been in power for over 10 years, that actually has created an opportunity. When a bully has been around for long enough, it exposes that bully to the world, the true nature of the bully and his techniques also. Because of that, the world is receptive to the idea that these tactics have no place in this century. And this is where we can exploit the opportunity by becoming, again, the voice of the weak, because it is important. Faisal was talking about Indian Muslims. Let us not stop there. Human rights abuses are human rights abuses, whether they happen here in Pakistan or elsewhere, right? In India, the way Dalits have been treated, they are also my people. The way Sikhs have been treated, the way Christians are being treated, even in Andhra Pradesh, where the chief minister, former chief minister, was a Christian, and the current one is thought to be a liberal or moderate Hindu. And the way he has actually created a controversy on Laddu, and by doing that, they have actually weaponized his hate against Christians. That also needs to be seen, and that needs also voice. So if you are conscientious enough that you can enforce the same kind of value system inside your country and in the region, then you can speak for everybody.
Definitely.
And this is why I keep on saying that prejudice, hate, discrimination, racism, none of this should have any role. And it goes against everybody. If I'm prejudiced against anybody, that should also not be tolerable. If we can do that, I'm sure that Pakistan has the space carved out for it. What is a hero? Hero is the man or the person who is at the right place at the right time and has the moral courage to do the right thing. If Pakistan does that, Pakistan is already a force of nature, a force of conscience.
Definitely, and Pakistan has shown that stature. The Prime Minister's exact words, the weak are not voiceless. It shows that it is not restricted to just our country, it is not restricted to just the people of the region, but of course any people that are oppressed, and of course any people that are facing human rights and oppression. And it would be a very hopeful statement for all those who are facing such injustices and oppressiveness. With regards to that, former Ambassador G.R. Baluch, I'd like your comment on how the conversation has shaped up so far. And additionally, as the Prime Minister talked about climate change, he talked about equitable development, he talked about how these countries that face the brink of climate change and its devastating impacts, as the reference was made to the 2022 floods as well. Pakistan suffered a loss of around $30 billion. The Prime Minister also talked about equitable development, inclusive growth, and when we see the issue of climate change going hand in hand with this equitable development and this issue of equal development and growth, how do you see this issue going forward?
Yeah, I think climate justice has become the global kind of cry. It's a demand of all those countries, in fact, the entire globe, who not only that those who are affected, but those who understand the damages, those who want to leave this globe livable for the future generations. And for us, for Pakistan and other countries which are those who do not contribute anything towards like climate global warming, but are the victims of the global warming because of the deeds of other industrialized countries who have really not exploited many other things that the people they colonized, but they unfortunately probably, I mean, I would be saying it metaphorically, in that process of industrialization followed by colonization, I think they did colonize the environment. They did not think of, imagine if this industrialization had taken place, uh, uh, had taken place while keeping the climate change, we wouldn't be at this critical juncture where we are so much close to the collapse of the entire ecosystem of the globe. So, and we know that we cannot reach those 2030 goals of not crossing 1.5 as well as zero emissions. So I think there has to be a voice, and Pakistan being a country which is so impacted, and I think not too far in 2022 we saw a apocalyptic kind of rain and flooding, and where we lost, as was being said, that about $30 billion of loss, not only in material but in terms of opportunity cost, as well as because so lakhs of acres of land was completely flooded, and there was no produce. Hundreds of thousands of schools have been destroyed, clinics have been destroyed, and of course, over 500,000 of the homes have been destroyed. So I think Pakistan, being a very immediate victim of this climate change, I think Pakistan really has to kind of assume a frontline soldier for the climate change struggle that has to be undertaken. There is just simply no escape. In fact, there is no uh, uh, there is no way that we cannot do it if we have to survive. So for the survival of our future generation, for the survival of this planet, I think we have to really be the flag bearers for the climate change. And I think it was a very good statement by our Prime Minister, and I'm sure it must have struck a good chord with the rest of the people who believe in the climate justice, who believe in the climate, to reducing the climate impact of the climate change, and of course having a equitable development where not only that those who already are developed, they continue to exploit the resources, including the environment of the globe. Yeah.
Baluch, I'm glad that you have highlighted this. There was another aspect which was, of course, highlighted by Prime Minister in his speech, and that was related to how he had to make very difficult decisions when it comes to Pakistan's economy, and how Pakistan has been, of course, coping with the difficulties. And Pakistan is not the only one that is facing these troubles. Of course, there are country after country when it comes to developing world and underdeveloped countries of the world. They are facing problems, and of course, it is believed that he must have been having a thought of two wars which are going on. How do you see this aspect of the speech, in which, owing to the fact that the wars are actually creating havoc for the underdeveloped and developing world's economies, and how a country like Pakistan is at a sort of a crossroads where Pakistan has been committing itself to very difficult decisions when it comes to economy itself? How do you see this aspect of his speech?
And Ambassador Saab, if you have time, allow me to also chip in. I'm really glad that you concluded your remarks on the mention of equitable development. I wanted you to, for our audience's benefit, to unpack this term, particularly in terms of choreography and architecture, what equitable, development may look like, and what exactly is the ask here.
Which probably requires a very big contemplation and deliberation. Nonetheless, the major contours which have emerged in the past few writings that one has seen, and some of the debates and some of the conversation that one has had with the development experts, is that there is this uh, mismatch between the resource and the available knowledge that we have. For example, we have a youth bulge in Pakistan, but do we have enough technological and vocational training facilities, or even financial resources to train those people? So obviously there is this mismatch between the availability of the very tools that are required for training our basic our future generation to fill that gap. We already know that there is huge what's called technological divide. There is a huge gap. There's a huge digital divide now in the world. So I think this needs to be done. This has to be addressed. How it can be done? So I think the experts can come up with that. That obviously requires transfer of technology and a transparency in the innovation and creation, because they have lots of resources, the industrialized world. And in fact, if you look at it, I would again go back to the industrial revolution, that it was very lopsided. It became a vehicle for the Western domination of the rest of the world, and that continues. And if we look at the international financial institutions, they are extremely controlled by the Western systems. So I think they need to be democratized. We need to, those who are the beneficiaries, they need to have also say in their decision making. So I think there is a huge need. Perhaps Pakistan can take initiative and have a international summit on equitable development and a democratic international financial order. So essentially, Mr. Pitafi, I think you might be tempted to write an article on how do we transform this not a very balanced international financial order. We need to come up with new financial order where the people who really need the support of the international financial order, they need to be part of the decision making. So that has to be contemplated. That has to come from the UN. Actually, why not? There are several organs of the United Nations which do address the challenges of development for the rest of the globe, and they have done a good job in a way, but they are pretty, I would say, dated. There are several organs, so I think they need to update, come up with some new initiatives on digital economy, come up with some kind of a internet, whatever happens on the internet, online businesses. So they have to come up with some solutions where countries like Pakistan, countries like all those developing countries, they really get on board with the rest of the globe and kind of, because I always believe that we can only visualize a prosperous world when it is equitable, when it's a peaceful world actually, when it is equitable, when it is prosperous. A divided world, a disparate world, a world that is not equitable, obviously will be a world ridden with crisis, with wars, and crisis that we see in these days in the entire globe at a different levels.
Yeah, Ambassador Baluch, one last question. It is not, of course, related to the speech of the Prime Minister. Rather, it is his meeting with, of course, Bangladesh, not Prime Minister, but of course, Chief Advisor of the interim government of Bangladesh, Muhammad Yunus. He met with him. How do you see at this hour, of course, they meeting in UNGA? And what kind of statement it would be giving, especially when we know that the seasoned, relevant politicians like Bill Clinton, former president of US, he had an interaction and he had shared the stage with Muhammad Yunus. How do you see all this? How important it is?
Yeah, actually, I was very, very impressed when the two leaders, they met. In fact, somebody sent me a video and I said, look at the warm body language of the two leaders, and especially the way the chief advisor of Bangladesh government, Mr. Yunus, and of course it was reciprocated by our prime minister, they met. I mean, I am a bit, what is it called, romantic in terms of Bangladesh. I mean, I always call them annoyed brothers, lost brothers. So since now we have found each other, come on, let's go and really embrace each other. Let's extend our warm and sincere hand of friendship to the Bangladeshi people. They are a proud nation. They won't come up to you first. You have to do the first move. So I think here is a historical opportunity, a window opportunity. We must not lose it. That I've been saying on the several forums or our foreign office, and I would use your forum to reiterate that here is an opportunity that you should go and write a new chapter in Bangladesh-Pakistani relationship, because that's very important for a balanced South Asia, a friendly South Asia, a South Asia which is in peace within and is in peace without. Pakistan and Bangladesh are two important wings in South Asia. If they become friendly, of course, not this friendship not be for the hostility towards any other country, but to make South Asia as a region. In fact, there is a very, very positive development that they already have asked Bangladesh that how to revive SARC. And the key to the peace, prosperity, and a balance kind of in this region, which is so crisis-ridden South Asia, is revival of SARC. So we must respond to that, revive SARC, revive our relationship with Bangladesh, and extend our warm and sincere hand of friendship with them, grab them, give them whatever they need, whatever we have in our small little way, but we must not lose this historical opportunity where we can reclaim our angry brother, our annoyed brother, which we probably had mishandled. I will not be like hesitant to say this. So I think those can be, those whatever was part of the history can be put aside and a new beginning can be made.
Of course, very beautifully put, former Ambassador G.R. Baluch. And of course, the beauty of the relationship between annoyed brothers, the sense of brotherhood gets ignited just with a warm hug or a warm gesture. Of course, thank you for your time and being part of the conversation, former Ambassador G.R. Baluch. Farrukh, Pitafi, your concluding remarks on how the conversation has shaped up before we conclude.
Right. I just wanted to very quickly actually comment on Mohammed Yunus, Dr. Mohammed Yunus, who is the head of Bangladesh now. I think that through his Grameen Bank initiative, he has proven to be what Prometheus was to the mortals when it came to the titan who stole fire from gods, actually brought it to the poor, right, and the needy. I think that he has built an economic foundation that can really go a long way for the rehabilitation of his people. So Pakistan can learn from that also. Remember that when we were talking about SARC, Prime Minister not only met with him, but with the Nepalese leader as well. And, in Sri Lanka also there is a growing opportunity because there has been a change in leadership there. And the new president, he is also responding to the same bullies that we keep on responding to. Nepal has been subjected to bullies, Bangladesh has been subjected to bullies, Sri Lanka has been, Pakistan has been. So if we, find a way to convince bully to stop bullying, then we can actually revive SARC and we can move ahead, because this is one area where our regional connectivity keeps on suffering because the prima donna in India keep on throwing temper tantrums.
Right, definitely, of course, these are very important issues that we talked about today, and of course how we highlighted the Prime Ministers and of course what the Prime Minister talked about in the United Nations General Assembly, the different issues that were talked about, and of course how important they were not only for Pakistan but for region and the world at large, as of course Pakistan talked about how there needs to be peace and a stable world in these challenging times. And of course the major development that we also saw today, the protest that was registered as the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and his delegation walked out of the United Nations General Assembly as the Israeli Prime Minister was set to address. And it also is a testament to Pakistan's commitment to the Palestinian cause, as it is a clear testament of the protest against Israel and how Pakistan will always stand side by side with their Palestinian and Kashmiri brethren. And of course, as the Prime Minister has said himself as well, the weak are not voiceless. With that, we'll conclude today's show. Farrukh, Pitafi and Raja Faisal, thank you both for your time and being part of the conversation. See you same time on Monday. Till then, take care.